in the scorching summer heat of 1941, Royal Air Force pilots soaring over the English Channel encountered something that would shatter their confidence and change the course of aerial warfare forever. The mysterious new German fighter that appeared in their gun sights that August moved with a terrifying combination of speed and power that left even the most experienced Spitfire pilots stunned and outmatched. What they witnessed was not just another enemy aircraft, but a revolutionary war machine that would temporarily strip Britain of its hard-fought air superiority and force the Allies into a desperate race for survival. The aircraft that shocked the world was the Focke-Wulf 190, a deadly predator that the Germans nicknamed the Verger or Shrike, but which Allied pilots would come to know by a far more ominous name, the Butcher Bird. This was no ordinary fighter plane. When RAF pilots first encountered these sleek, radial-engined hunters over France in August 1941, many initially mistook them for captured French Curtiss P-36 Mohawks due to their distinctive engine configuration. The brutal reality of what they were actually facing would become horrifyingly clear within moments of engagement. The mastermind behind this revolutionary fighter was Kurt Tank, a German aeronautical engineer, whose radical design philosophy would fundamentally challenge everything the aviation world believed about fighter aircraft development. Tank's journey to creating the Focke-Wulf 190 began with a crushing defeat. His earlier design, the Focke-Wulf 159, had been thoroughly outclassed and rejected in favor of the Messerschmitt Bf 109 during the German fighter competitions of the late 1930s. Rather than accept defeat, Tank used this setback as fuel for a completely revolutionary approach to fighter design. Tank's design philosophy represented a radical departure from the prevailing wisdom of the era. While other designers focused obsessively on creating the fastest possible aircraft, Tank drew from his experiences as both a cavalry officer and infantry soldier during World War I. He had witnessed firsthand the harsh realities of military equipment, operating under brutal wartime conditions, and this shaped his vision for what a true combat aircraft should be. Tank famously explained his philosophy by comparing existing fighters to racehorses that required perfect conditions and constant pampering to perform at their peak. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the British Spitfire, he argued, were indeed the fastest fighters in the world when everything went perfectly, but they were liable to falter the moment conditions became difficult. Instead of building another racehorse, Tank envisioned creating what he called a Diensthöfert, a cavalry horse that could operate from rough frontline airfields, be flown and maintained by pilots and mechanics with minimal training, and absorb significant battle damage while still bringing its pilot home alive. This philosophy would prove to be devastatingly effective in practice. Tank's revolutionary approach extended to every aspect of the Focke-Wulf 190's design, from its power plant selection to its advanced electronic systems. The heart of Tank's revolutionary design was his decision to use a radial engine when virtually every other European fighter relied on inline configurations. At the time, most aviation experts believed that the large frontal area of radial engines would create too much drag for effective fighter performance. Tank disagreed, having observed the successful use of radial engines by the United States Navy, and he was convinced that proper streamlining could eliminate the drag penalty while providing significant advantages in power, reliability, and survivability. The engine Tank selected was the BMW 801, a twin-row 14-cylinder radial power plant that displaced 41.8 liters and produced an impressive 1,677 horsepower. This massive engine was cooled by an innovative annular system that drew air through a ring-shaped intake around the engine's perimeter, providing efficient cooling while maintaining the aircraft's streamlined profile. The BMW 801's robust construction made it far more resistant to battle damage than the liquid-cooled inline engines used in most contemporary fighters, as it could continue operating even after losing several cylinders to enemy fire. Tank's attention to practical operational requirements extended to every aspect of the aircraft's design. The Focke-Wulf 190 featured wide-tracked landing gear that provided excellent stability during ground operations, allowing the aircraft to operate safely from rough, unprepared airfields, where narrower-geared fighters would be prone to ground loops and accidents. The cockpit was spacious and well-arranged, reducing pilot fatigue during long missions and making the aircraft easier for inexperienced pilots to master. Perhaps most revolutionary was Tank's decision to replace traditional cable and pulley flight controls with an advanced electronic control system. This innovation, unprecedented in fighter aircraft at the time, provided more precise control responses and reduced pilot workload, particularly during high-stress combat situations. The system also proved more reliable than mechanical controls, as electronic connections were less prone to battle damage than physical cables that could be severed by enemy fire. When the first production, Focke-Wulf 190 A-1s rolled off the assembly lines in June 1941, they represented a quantum leap in fighter aircraft capability. The aircraft measured 29 feet 4 inches in length, with a wingspan of 34 feet 5.5 inches, and weighed 7,055 pounds empty, with a maximum takeoff weight of 10,803 pounds. The FW-190 could carry substantially more fuel, ammunition, and external stores than its contemporaries. The aircraft's performance statistics were nothing short of extraordinary for 1941. The FW-190A-1 could reach a maximum speed of 408 miles per hour, or 657 kilometers per hour, at 18,300 feet, or 5,579 meters, making it faster than the Spitfire Mark V at most operational altitudes. Its rate of climb was equally impressive, at 2,624 feet, or 800 meters per minute initially, allowing it to rapidly gain altitude advantage over enemy aircraft. The Focke-Wulf 190's armament was devastatingly effective, consisting of two 13mm MG 131 machine guns mounted in the upper fuselage and two 20mm MG 151 cannons mounted in the wing roots. This combination provided both the high rate of fire needed for deflection shooting and the destructive power necessary to bring down heavily built Allied aircraft with just a few hits. Optional underwing cannon pods could mount additional 20mm guns, creating a total firepower package that could destroy bombers with single bursts. The aircraft's combat debut over France in August 1941 sent shockwaves through Royal Air Force squadrons that had grown accustomed to air superiority. RAF pilots flying Spitfire Mark Vs suddenly found themselves outclassed in virtually every performance category except turning radius. The FW-190 could outrun, outclimb, and outdive the Spitfire while delivering far more destructive firepower. Worse still, the German aircraft could absorb battle damage that would down a Spitfire and continue fighting. The psychological impact on Allied aircrews was immediate and devastating. Pilots who had dominated the skies during the Battle of Britain now found themselves prey to a hunter that seemed almost supernatural in its capabilities. Combat reports from late 1941 describe RAF pilots' growing reluctance to engage FW-190s on equal terms, with many choosing to break off attacks rather than press home engagements against the superior German fighters. The first major operation to showcase the Focke-Wulf 190's capabilities was Operation Cerberus on February 12, 1942. This audacious daylight breakout of German naval forces through the English Channel required continuous fighter cover against expected heavy RAF attacks. Adolf Galland, the General der Jagdflieger, insisted that FW-190s provide the primary escort, and the results exceeded all expectations. Jagdgeschwader 26 achieved 7 confirmed aerial victories and 6 probables, while losing only 4 FW-190s and their pilots. Galland would later call this operation the greatest hour of his career, a testament to the FW-190's combat effectiveness. However, it was Operation Jubilee, the Allied raid on Dieppe on August 19, 1942, that truly demonstrated the FW-190's devastating potential in large-scale combat. The Royal Air Force committed over 300 fighter aircraft to support the operation, consisting primarily of Spitfire Mark 5B models, with only 6 squadrons of the newer Spitfire Mark 9B variants. Several squadrons of Hawker Hurricanes and early RAF Allison-engined Mustangs provided fighter bomber and reconnaissance support. Facing this massive Allied air armada were just 115 German fighters from Jagdgeschwader II and Jagdgeschwader 26, units that had recently converted from the Messerschmitt Bf-109 to the new FW-190. The numerical odds heavily favored the Allies, but the technological advantage lay entirely with the Germans. What followed was one of the most lopsided aerial engagements of World War II. The 2 German Jagdgeschwader lost 25 FW-190s to all causes during the day's fighting, including aircraft lost to crashes and mechanical failures, as well as combat losses. In return, they claimed 61 of the 106 Allied aircraft lost that day, with Jagdgeschwader 26 claiming 40 victories and Jagdgeschwader 2 adding 21 more. The human cost was even more telling. Fighting over occupied territory, the RAF lost 81 pilots and aircrew killed or captured, while Luftwaffe fighter losses totaled just 20 pilots killed, 14 from Jagdgeschwader 26 and 6 from Jagdgeschwader 2. These statistics reveal the true horror of what the FW-190 represented for Allied aircrews. German pilots were achieving kill ratios of nearly 3-to-1 against numerically superior forces while operating from their home bases with short supply lines. Had this technological advantage been maintained, the planned Allied invasion of France would have faced aerial opposition capable of inflicting catastrophic losses on supporting air forces. The turning point in this deadly aerial chess game came through an extraordinary stroke of luck that reads like fiction, but proved devastatingly real. On June 23, 1942, Oberleutnant Armin Faber of Jagdgeschwader 2 became disoriented during a combat mission over southwestern England. After shooting down a Royal Air Force Spitfire piloted by Sergeant František Treitnar near the village of Blackdog in Devon, Faber found himself alone and confused about his position. In his disorientation, Faber made a navigation error that would change the course of the war. Mistaking the Bristol Channel for the English Channel, he flew north instead of south, believing that Wales was occupied France. When he spotted what he thought was a friendly German airfield, Faber waggled his wings in a victory celebration, lowered his landing gear, and touched down at Royal Air Force Pembrey in South Wales, home to the RAF's Air Gunnery School. The duty pilot at Pembrey, Sergeant Jeffries, could hardly believe what he was witnessing as the distinctive radial engine fighter rolled to a stop on the British airfield. Armed with only a flare gun since Pembrey was a training station, Jeffries jumped onto the aircraft's wing and took the stunned German pilot prisoner. Faber was so devastated by his error that he attempted suicide while in initial custody, realizing that he had just handed the British the intelligence coup of the war. The captured FW-190EA-3, work number 2313, was immediately subjected to intensive testing and evaluation by the Royal Aircraft Establishment. British test pilots flew the aircraft extensively, documenting its performance characteristics, handling qualities, and most importantly, its weaknesses. What they discovered would prove crucial to Allied survival in the air war. The British evaluation revealed that while the FW-190 was superior to the Spitfire Mark V at low and medium altitudes, its performance dropped significantly above 25,000 feet, or 7,600 meters. The BMW 801 radial engine, for all its advantages in power and reliability, suffered from reduced efficiency at high altitude compared to the supercharged Merlin engines powering British fighters. This weakness would prove crucial as Allied bomber operations increasingly took place at high altitudes where the FW-190's performance advantage disappeared. British engineers also discovered handling quirks that could be exploited in combat. If the FW-190's airspeed dropped below 127 miles per hour or 204 kilometers per hour, the aircraft would stall, drop its port wing, and suddenly flip onto its back. Pilots converting to the FW-190 were warned about these characteristics, but Allied pilots who learned about this tendency could potentially force German pilots into dangerous situations during low-speed dogfights. The intelligence gained from Faber's captured aircraft accelerated British development of improved Spitfire variants. The Spitfire Mark IX, which had been under development, received priority production and was specifically optimized to counter the FW-190 threat. When the Mark IX entered service in July 1942, it restored qualitative parity to aerial combat over Western Europe, ending the period of German air superiority that had lasted nearly a year. Labrit, the FW-190's design philosophy of ruggedness and versatility led to its adaptation for multiple roles beyond pure air superiority fighting. The F-series transformed the aircraft into a dedicated ground attack platform with strengthened airframes, additional armor protection, and provisions for carrying bombs, rockets, and anti-tank weapons. FW-190 F-8s could carry up to 1,102 pounds or 500 kilograms of external tanks, while retaining their formidable air-to-air capabilities. The G-series variants modified the basic fighter for long-range missions, adding drop tanks and extended-range fuel systems that enabled the aircraft to escort bombers deep into enemy territory. These Jabo variants, as they were known, proved particularly effective in hit-and-run attacks against Allied shipping and coastal installations, striking with devastating effect before Allied fighters could respond. Number E. Perhaps most fearsome were the specialized Sturmbach or storm rams, heavily armed FW-190s designed specifically for attacking Allied bomber formations. These aircraft carried additional armor protection around the cockpit and engine, along with massive 30mm Mk108 cannons capable of destroying heavy bombers with a single hit. Some Sturmbach even carried unguided rockets for firing into tight bomber formations from long range. The FW-190's combat effectiveness on the Eastern Front proved equally devastating when it finally arrived in November and December 1942. Unlike the high-altitude fighting that characterized much of the Western Front, combat on the Eastern Front typically took place at low and medium altitudes, where the FW-190's advantages were most pronounced. German pilots found the aircraft perfectly suited to the harsh conditions of the Russian winter, where its robust construction and reliable radial engine proved far superior to the temperamental inline-engined fighters that preceded it. Soviet pilots, flying aircraft like the Yakovlev Yak-9 and Lavochkin La-5, found themselves facing a technological disadvantage similar to what RAF pilots had experienced in 1941. The FW-190's superior firepower, protection, and performance gave German pilots a significant edge in aerial combat, even as overall German air strength continued to decline due to pilot losses and fuel shortages. The aircraft's versatility proved crucial as Germany was forced into increasingly desperate defensive measures. FW-190 fighter bombers conducted precision strikes against Soviet armor concentrations, while specialized night fighting variants attempted to counter growing Allied bomber threats. The aircraft's ability to operate from rough forward airfields kept German air power mobile and responsive, even as traditional airbases came under attack. Production of the FW-190 reached impressive levels despite Allied bombing of German aircraft factories. Total production exceeded 23,800 aircraft across all variants, making it one of the most numerous fighters of World War II. The A-8 variant alone accounted for 6,655 aircraft, reflecting its importance as the backbone of late-war German fighter operations. The FW-190 A-8 incorporated lessons learned from years of combat operations, featuring improved armor protection, upgraded armament options, and enhanced electronic systems. These aircraft could be configured as pure fighters, fighter bombers, or specialized attack aircraft, depending on mission requirements, demonstrating the flexibility that Tank had designed into the original concept. Manufacturing was dispersed across multiple facilities to reduce vulnerability to Allied bombing, with major production centers at Focke-Wulf's main plant at Bremen, the AGO facility at Oschersleben, and several smaller subcontractors. Despite repeated bombing attacks, production continued until the final months of the war, with the last FW-190A-9s rolling off the assembly lines in February 1945. The human cost of the FW-190's effectiveness was staggering. Allied aircrew casualties in combat against these fighters numbered in the thousands, representing experienced pilots whose loss degraded overall Allied air effectiveness. Entire squadrons were decimated in encounters with AEW-190 formations, forcing constant replacement of crews and aircraft that stretched Allied training and production resources. German pilots who flew the FW-190 consistently praised its combat effectiveness compared to earlier fighters. Pilots transitioning from the Messerschmitt Bf-109 found the FW-190 superior in firepower, protection, and handling to the altitudes where most combat occurred. The aircraft's forgiving flight characteristics made it easier for hastily trained replacement pilots to master, a crucial advantage as experienced German pilots were lost and training time was reduced. The psychological impact of facing FW-190s in combat created lasting trauma among Allied aircrews. Many pilots developed a deep reluctance to engage the distinctive radial-engined fighters on anything approaching equal terms, preferring to use numerical superiority and altitude advantages rather than risk direct confrontation. This psychological dominance persisted even after improved Allied fighters restored technical parity. Perchet. When the long-awaited D-Day invasion launched on June 6, 1944, FW-190s formed the backbone of German air resistance over the Normandy beaches. Despite being heavily outnumbered by Allied air forces, German pilots flying FW-190s managed to contest Allied air superiority throughout the critical opening phases of the invasion. The aircraft's ability to operate from rough forward airstrips proved invaluable as traditional Luftwaffe bases came under constant Allied attack. FW-190 squadrons could relocate quickly to concealed positions, launching surprise attacks against Allied ground forces and supply convoys before disappearing back to hidden airfields. However, the overwhelming numerical superiority of Allied air forces, combined with chronic fuel shortages and the loss of experienced pilots, gradually eroded the FW-190's effectiveness. By late 1944, even the most advanced variants struggled to achieve meaningful results against the massive Allied air armadas that dominated European skies. The final evolution of Tanks' design philosophy appeared in the FW-190D series, which replaced the original BMW radial engine with an inline Junkers Jumo 213 power plant. This high-altitude variant restored the aircraft's competitiveness against late-war Allied fighters, like the P-51 Mustang and improved Spitfire variants, but arrived too late and in too few numbers to affect the war's outcome. And the FW-190's legacy extends far beyond its immediate combat effectiveness during World War II. Tanks' design philosophy of prioritizing reliability, versatility, and survivability over pure performance influenced post-war fighter development around the world. The aircraft's wide-track landing gear, spacious cockpit, and robust construction became standard features in subsequent fighter designs. Modern aerospace engineers studying the FW-190 continue to find innovative solutions that remain relevant today. The aircraft's electronic flight controls presaged modern fly-by-wire systems, while its modular weapon systems influenced current multi-role fighter designs. Tank's emphasis on maintainability and operational flexibility remains a cornerstone of successful military aircraft development. The 28 surviving original FW-190s preserved in museums worldwide serve as testament to the aircraft's historical significance and engineering excellence. These artifacts allow modern audiences to appreciate the technological achievement that temporarily shifted the balance of aerial warfare and forced the Allies to accelerate their own aircraft development programs. In the end, the Focke-Wulf 190 represented both the pinnacle of German engineering achievement and a sobering reminder of how quickly technological advantages can shift in modern warfare. Tank's revolutionary design philosophy created an aircraft that was arguably the finest fighter of its era, but Germany's industrial limitations and strategic disadvantages prevented it from changing the war's ultimate outcome. The Butcher Bird had shown the world what was possible when innovative thinking challenged conventional wisdom, leaving a legacy that continues to influence military aviation development 8 decades after its first flight.